All right, so good morning, everybody, and I want to welcome you to How to Thrive, Not Just Survive series. We are in our part 2 of this. I'm not sure if individuals were able to join our January session, but off the back of that, we really had quite a turnout, a lot of success, and a lot of great feedback. With that being said, we wanted to continue our journey with you. We're actually working on a series this time, so we are in our part 1 of this series, which is building a base and building trust. So we're really excited to have you here today. On the next slide, I'll quickly introduce myself. I'm Sarah Brown, Project Director at TP Bennett, and I'd like to give a quick shout out to Tamara McKenzie at Stanway Interiors. She's been on this journey, I think, starting about this time last year, and it's been a very exciting one to work on this series. So I'll be your MC for today, kind of timekeeping, all the admin, all the boring bits, and we'll hopefully get you quickly into the sessions where you meet the real meat and the fun presenters. On the next slide, just to remind you again, please go ahead to the website if you have a minute and you've enjoyed the session today to look at our May 19th session coming up, which is building confidence and connections. So we're very excited about the May 12th series as well as the May 19th series as they do link. However, if you want to attend these and not those, don't worry, because we do have a wrap up in June that we're hoping you'll join as well with a little bit of networking at the end. Now, of course, sorry, just back one slide, please. Now, just of course, we need to highlight that there are a few other global UK chapter events coming up. These will start to pop onto the website. So Cornet is always running something interesting out there, and lots of people are putting hard work into keeping you guys busy with your calendars packed. So check those out when you have a moment. And without further ado, we do need to say thank you to our sponsors. We couldn't be here today without them. So of course, a big thank you to everyone, our sponsors, as well as all the people behind the scenes that put so much effort into making sure that these events are a success. And let's get into it. Introducing our speakers today, we have Lydia and Menta from Colliers International, and we have Chris and Di from Team Exos. We're going to be running 2 sessions today that are very, very different, but all linked around you. And hopefully today you come out with some tangible pieces, a little bit to add to your kit of parts and your toolkit to make sure that you find success in this crazy new way of working. Now, I will hand the mic to Lydia and Menta for their portion of this.
Thanks very much, Sarah, for that introduction, and good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. So hopefully you've been able to log on to menti.com and enter the code. The code's just up there on the screen again now, in case you haven't managed to do that. We're going to try and get a bit of audience participation in this session to keep you all awake. So do go onto that and you'll be able to follow the slides on your phone, and there'll be a couple of questions for you to answer. So just as a warm up for that, before we kick off, so I'm here to talk about, we're here to talk today about building trust in a world that is slightly crazy and has been for the past year or so. So I'd like you to just type into your screen now on your phone, which 3 words best describe 2020 for you? I'll just give you a few moments to do that. And hopefully we'll start to see some coming through on the screen. Some familiar words there. It was nice to see the first 3 that came up being peaceful and reflective. That was really nice. Perhaps not what I was immediately expecting. Change, challenging, it's coming up. Obviously the ones that are bigger, the ones that are coming up most frequently, unprecedented as we'd expect. Scary. Lots of change. Rewarding, that's good. It's nice to see. Still some coming in. Okay, I think it seems to have stemmed the flow. So I think what we see there is the ones that are in the bigger font: unprecedented, scary, challenging, and change. And actually, I looked this morning, and the Oxford English Dictionary have said that unprecedented was the word of 2020, which is not very surprising. Okay, so we've heard a lot of that in this past year, and I just but I actually, when I was thinking about this, I asked myself the question of just how unprecedented was the past 12 months. This slide is a collection of photographs, and whenever I talk on this topic, I always go to update this slide. And what's interesting is that there is always something to add. And I don't know, you might see some of the pictures here and realize that you'd forgotten some of these things happened. Obviously, there's a predominance around COVID, Zoom meetings, us working through screens. But actually, we started last year fearing for World War III. We were talking about Meghan and Harry quitting the royal family, and the whole world was preparing for the Olympic Games. And then, of course, COVID hit, which became the main news. But what we see here in this very small collection of images is that we live in a very complex and changeable environment. And I think, whilst the impact of what's happened over the past 12 months will certainly be deep and very far reaching, and I'm not disputing that, the turbulence it's caused is not new to us. If you just think back to those early days following the Brexit vote, there was huge chaos everywhere in the financial markets. We had politicians resigning left, right and centre, and nobody knew what was going on. It was the same kind of unprecedented period that a similar unprecedented period that we've had over the past 12 months. And of course, that change is not, it's not new. Technology is advancing all the time. That comes with its own challenges, and it has challenges on our business, on our markets. But COVID has certainly made our lives very unpredictable. We've all had new technology to support. We've had no more commute, but we've been working from home and balancing homeschooling and families. And of course, now we have some light at the end of the tunnel with the vaccine. But that whole context is the macro backdrop to our lives and the decisions that we've had to make and the reactions we have to what is going on around us. So if we think about that as the context, we're all leaders, whether we are at work, leading at work, of clients, of projects, of teams, or whether it's at home where we're leading our homes, our families, and with our friends. And over time, I've heard many leaders speak about their leadership journey, how it's been shaped, and they've all got really interesting and very different stories to tell. But one that is true is that the only constant is change. And we have to make sense of that, what is going on around us to manage that. We have to think about that bigger picture. We can't just focus on the little corner of the jigsaw and what's going on for us. So we always have to remember that broader context. And why that's so important is because how we manage ourselves with all that chaos around us and how we build trust with each other as leaders, as colleagues, or as friends, that's what gives us a grounding and helps us make sense in that chaos. So if that's the world we're living in, but instead of referring to that as a bunch of pictures that I might update from time to time when I talk about this, that concept does actually have its own term. Some of you may be familiar with this term, which is VUCA. This is the world we are operating in. And actually, rather than just the past 12 months, it's the new normal that has actually been around for quite a while. The concept's been around for years. It was first introduced by the US Army after the Cold War, but the acronym was really created in the late 90s. And business leaders started to adopt the term to describe the chaotic and turbulent and rapidly changing business environment that they were experiencing. Organizations are regularly plunged into turbulent environments. Technology is changing all the time, and the world's population is simultaneously growing and aging. And of course, we have global disasters which come in and disrupt lives, economies, and businesses. So the world we're living in is a VUCA world, can be described as a VUCA world. So it's volatile. The rate and the pace of change means that you really can lose your competitive advantage overnight. Some research by the Boston Consulting Group found that half of the most turbulent financial quarters have occurred during the past 30 years. Have happened since sort of mid-2000s. They also concluded that the financial turbulence has increased in its intensity and persists for longer than it did in the past. And that kind of environment demands us all to react quickly to ongoing changes which are unpredictable and outside of our control. It's an uncertain world. We don't know and we can't predict what will happen next. And I think COVID has really brought that into the spotlight for us over the past 12 months. That makes it really difficult to plan for the future. So the volatility making it difficult for leaders to use past issues and events as predictors of future outcomes. And that makes forecasting really difficult and decision-making very challenging. It's a complex world, so there are numerous and difficult to understand causes and mitigating factors of what's going on around us, both internally and externally, and that adds layers of complexity. And of course, with that, and added to the turbulence, the change and the absence of those past predictors, it can lead to confusion, which causes the ambiguity. So there's not very much black and white, there's a lot of grey and a lot of mixed meanings. So why is all that important? Why am I talking about that today? And how does it really affect us as we emerge from this pandemic? Well, I think it's important because how we all respond in times of crisis and chaos and uncertainty has a real impact on those around us. And whether you're leading people or whether you're being led, as we start to embrace our new ways of working, which are going to be our new business as usual rather than our emergency ways of working, for that to be successful, we really have to understand and be aware of that context and how it impacts our own behaviours and actions. So thinking about that context, if I can ask you to go back to your phones, with that context in mind, that VUCA world in mind, which of these do you think will be most important as we establish that new business as usual? Agility, trust, good communication, or engagement? So lots of votes for trust and communication. Oh, it's tight, looking tight. I think what we see there is, that piece around trust is really, really important. VUCA as a concept may be here to stay, but it doesn't have to feel overwhelming and unmanageable. I know that when I describe that kind of the VUCA definitions, it always can feel a little bit depressing and overwhelming, but it doesn't have to, because if we have that awareness of what's going on around us and then what we need to be able to manage in that context, then we can take more control of it. So our poll shows that you all know what's important, what's going to be important as we come out of this. So if you can move to the next slide, please. So how can we be successful in that VUCA world? So I think what I've put up here is we can think about this in how we relate to others, but also how we manage ourselves. And actually, in some ways, that self-management piece needs to come first, because how we manage ourselves in terms of our responses to the VUCA world, how we deal with challenges personally, how we cope with the uncertainty is really, really important, because if we can manage ourselves, then managing our collaboration and our relationships with others becomes really easy, because you're starting from a position of self-management. So at the root of all this, we've put trust. Trust is at the heart of it all. That's trust in ourselves, trust in our decision-making, trusting our instincts and our feelings, and then being able to trust others, trusting their ability, their contribution, their values, and our relationship with them, as well as our relationships outside of work. So with that solid foundation of trust, living and working successfully in this VUCA world just comes down then to having the resilience to bounce back, to cope with the next challenge, and to learn from it. So hopefully that all sounds pretty straightforward, she says, but actually, how do we build and maintain that trust? Minta.
Thanks, Lydia. So what can we do to build trust in ourselves and in others? It's such a great question, especially in the context of the world that we live and that we work in. I'm going to introduce you to the trust equation, which you may have heard yourself from a very popular book called The Trusted Advisor, which is written by Dave Meister and Rob Gelford. So, if you've heard of the trust equation, you may have thought about it from a client management perspective or a client engagement perspective. However, I'm going to use the same framework on on how do we build trust in a VUCA world. Okay, so key components of trusting people and building trust are credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. This is with our clients, teams, colleagues, families, friends. So let's look at each component and how we position that in the trust of ourselves and in others. And if we start from a position of trusting ourselves, we are much more mindful of the trust in others. So let's first look at credibility and this, credibility and the trust that I find in myself. That confidence in knowing what I'm doing, I trust my instinct, my judgment, and the decisions that I choose to make. And I trust others. We trust others when they give us credible information, data, and direction. In 2020, for example, we looked to our leaders. Each of us probably switched on the news at 5 p.m. every day, trying to figure out what is it that we're going to hear from our leaders today, from our Prime Minister, medical experts, our CEOs, for example, and we look to them for their credible expertise. We need to trust in what our leader is doing. So looking now to reliability of myself and the trust that I find in myself. I trust that I will do what I say I will do, and I expect the same from my colleagues, leaders, families, and friends. So in others, we trust in people when they do what they say, when they stick to their commitments and their promises. And we trust our leaders when they do what they say they're going to do. So we need credibility and reliability. Those two seem pretty simple. Now let's look at intimacy. How well do I know myself and others? How well do I walk in my own shoes and the shoes of others? I know my values and the right things to do and the things that I need in this VUCA world. So if I can trust in myself, then how can I trust that in others? We trust our leaders and our people around us to be authentic and to provide us with a psychological safety. And that is the ability to be able to speak up and participate in a group without fear of consequences. So I feel safe to ask my leader questions. I feel safe to share my anxieties and stresses with the people that are around me. So an example of trust in teamwork and psychological safety, you may have heard that in 2019, the Red Bull team had their fastest pit stop for 1.82 seconds. And they achieved that over and over again that year. So how did they do that? It didn't come down to mechanical advantage. It came down to human performance, that they put their trust in each other. So if we start from a position of trust in ourselves and in others, we start to see a theory called the domino effect. It suggests that if we change one behavior, it will spark a chain of reactions in related behaviors and events. So for example, Lydia has the confidence in me to invite me to present today. Thank you, Lydia. And then I want to be able to pass that confidence on to somebody else in my team, and so on and so forth. Trust becomes infectious. So given that this domino effect can influence positive habits, it's a very positive tool. Trust is infectious. So applying this further to the workplace, or perhaps the people that are around us, we work on the premise to trust first, location second. So the same way applies to building friendships and relationships with those around us. Our core fundamentals and principles of leadership, and that be leading myself, leading others, leading clients, leading my projects, perhaps leading other people, we work from the premise of trust first, location second. So we need to think about, what do we think about when we speak of leadership? Okay? Just because we cannot see others, or that perhaps we're working remotely, it doesn't mean that we should stop sharing information, being curious, asking questions. So for example, in 2020, a new way of sharing information at Colliers was every quarter, our senior leadership team would share highly confidential information with every employee in our business. They trusted their people to use that information for knowledge sharing internally. Those core principles did not change. We simply changed our mode of communication. But we have to remember that as we work through this VUCA world, that one size will not fit all. So how do we make sure that our people feel that their needs are met? This is a really friendly reminder that as we work differently in a VUCA world, one size may not fit all. People will need different, and different is not wrong. Different is just different. And this is when we need to trust in others for help, when we lean on our colleagues because they are credible, reliable, and that we feel safe discussing our needs with them. And as these things change around us, transparency, communication, and trust is key.
Thanks, Minta. Some really useful insight there around how we can build trust. So hopefully we've shared with you a little bit in that context, some understanding around the context that we're in, that it's not really all that unusual, that we've been in an ever-changing VUCA world for some years now, and I don't think that is going anywhere. But we have lots of things in our toolkit that can help us manage that context. So trusting in yourself and others, backing yourself, having that sort of remembering that credibility, reliability and intimacy, the trust equation. Knowing your values, I always think that's really important. It's always worth putting the investment in to reflect on what your personal values are, because it's in moments of crisis and uncertainty that's what you compass back to. Everybody compass back to what they value most, and they're always a good guide in terms of decision making if it sits comfortably with your values. Collaboration, so important. It's been so important over the past 12 months as we've all been remote, but it's going to be even more so as we go into sort of new hybrid ways of working. Keeping in touch, your network's there, it'll be there in different ways, it'll be there in different places, but it is still there, and it's really important to sort of keep that collaboration in mind. And leading by example, and as I said, it's not about, leadership isn't about hierarchy. I don't think that it's about hierarchy anymore. We're all leading in different ways. And remembering that, and that trust is infectious, and being curious, reflecting and thinking about what might be next, what's going to be coming around the corner, so that whilst we might not be able to predict it, we can be prepared. None of this is rocket science, but I think that building some awareness for ourselves and noticing what goes on around us can really help in dealing with the unexpected, which of course we should all now know to expect. We don't have to have all the answers. Nobody will have all the answers, but we need to be comfortable that those answers will be found, and they are generally found. We just have to be patient sometimes. And just finally, before I go, I mentioned earlier about self-management as one of the keys to all of this, and there's huge amounts of research which shows that successful leaders are resilient. But it's not just leaders who need to be resilient. We all need to be resilient, and we can learn from those leaders who find ways in their daily routines to build that resilience. Often it's exercise. I know that for me, I find running or cycling a great way to either shake off the day or to set it up. So this morning I went for a nice run in the sunshine, and it set my day up nicely because I know I've got a full day of meetings. So just thinking about the things that for you will work for you to sort of give you that balance and manage yourself and your own resilience. So right now, VUCA is for us about COVID, but the principles that we've talked about today will apply to the next VUCA moment as well. So before we pause for any questions, please do use the chat if you've got any questions or you want to raise any points. But before we do that, I'd just like to see what you think our next VUCA moment will be. So if you look down at your screen and just type in what you think the next VUCA moment will be. It's a light-hearted question to end on. Globalization. Just the one. World War III. We might go back to that.
It's a tough question, Lydia.
Yeah, it is a tough question. None of us can see around corners. Climate change, I think, it was some serious issues, but they're all there. All these things, climate change has been around for a while. All of this stuff is there. We just, that awareness and thinking about it, this hasn't been, I think my point is, this hasn't been as unprecedented as perhaps everybody's said. It's just the impact has been so global that we've all, but the change, the VUCA world's been around for a long time. So and just to pause there for any questions. We've got some comments coming in. Trust is a result of good communication and engagement. It's the outcome of the behaviours and actions. I like that. It's really, really true. Everyone's a leader. The world is about managing up and down the ladder. It's all tied to trust. So clearly we've stunned you all into silence. And I'm going to pass over to Chris and Di now to take you through the next part of this session.
Wow, thank you, Lydia and Minta, that was great. Good morning, everybody. It's a real pleasure to connect with you this morning. Just introduce myself, Chris Kaufman, and my friend and colleague, Di, who will pick up in a second. There's so much great content in that last piece for us to dissect. And now I guess Di and I want to try to take some of those themes and get a little bit more practical, helping you really to take control, optimize your day, and how to action or create personal actionable habits. So developing leadership is clearly a theme there, and wanting to stay with that as we transition from more of an organizational sense into the values and needs of individuals. I thought it'd be useful just to share a little bit of context as we kick off. So I just wanted to take you through some of our experience about the corporate wellness evolution and some of the learnings coming through from that in terms of performance in the workplace, how that can then translate through to relate to all of us. So for me, it's been a really interesting and ever-changing experience, spending the last decade plus working with a whole range of organizations and helping them to assess their initiatives and adaptations in terms of focusing on and developing a healthy workforce, their strategies and nurturing leadership and business performance. A lot of great ideas have come from that in terms of the need to optimize our human capital. And for many years, this was commonly seen as really as a head office focus, viewed through the lens of the important few and attracting and retaining the best staff. There's certainly a lot of logic in that approach, but in the last 5 to 10 years, the impetus has shifted very much to a focus away from the key individuals and into the majority of the workforce, recognizing and espousing the needs for a wider team to engage, to give a whole of workforce focus, and seeking the need to improve the performance of the business as a whole. Words like presenteeism became much more relevant to describe the behaviors of people who are really unable to perform at their best in the workplace and in their role. And the subtle challenges of trying to get the most out of ourselves became really relevant in the workplace, and how we cope with the various pressures, some of which are visible and some of which are invisible. It's a tough challenge for organizations to assess and manage that, and even harder as the workforces became more remote, on the road by geography and the nature of the work we do. There's lots of thoughtful solutions from forward-thinking employers coming out of that time with varying degrees of success. Organizations employed services like health checks, health evaluations, access to services like doctors, nurses, physios, and even gyms. And I just want to pause on that thought for a second as we take sort of the gym model of well-being and how that's evolved and some of the learnings from that. Both Di and I have run and designed over 100 of these sort of leading corporate gyms over the last 10, 15 years. And some of these facilities are phenomenal with access to integrated services where employees can do anything from a range of access to gym, play games during breakouts, access table tennis, and even play things like Wii Sports, which is all great. These spaces are really impressive and they compete with the high street. But as we know, during lockdown, they've been closed and we've had to find a different way to do things. The return on investment for those sorts of spaces is often fantastic, with it believed to be as much as £4 return for every pound put in. And the outcomes in terms of NPS scores, reduced health, improved sickness absence, or reduced sickness absence and improved health are there to be seen. But the challenge with that sort of facility is it only attracts 25% of the employed population. And really it's the 75% that we really want to focus on. So lockdown has really presented a rapid acceleration of these trends. And we're already starting to see how people have adapted to taking accountability for themselves. There's so much that can be learned from the real innovators in this space. And I wanted to just spend a couple of minutes identifying some of the most valuable themes before handing over to Di. And Di is one of the most engaging and effective coaches I've ever had the pleasure of working with. He's going to take you through some great resilience tips today. And at that point, we'd love you to lean in, to ask any questions you've got when you think about how these can be applied to yourselves. And if possible, to just find a little bit of space around you and to actually engage and participate in some of these fantastic little tools, which should help you to thrive and to de-stress. So just taking one final minute of me talking to to dissect some of the most cutting edge workplace wellbeing programs and how these can benefit us today. Talked a little bit about the integrated model, which is really a healthcare continuum, meeting people where they need to be. And I think that hits on the need for choice. So whether you're feeling poorly, whether you need to be diagnosed, or whether simply, as with most of us over lockdown, it's been a question of finding the right time to tend to your needs and the needs of those in your bubble at the appropriate moments. We all know we've been faced with hours and hours of Zoom calls back to back and sitting in a chair, which probably wasn't ever designed to be your office space potentially. It can be complicated and challenging. And therefore finding the right way to do it's important. As I talked about with the gym, a number of organizations have really evolved that model even before lockdown. And just for a second to think about what Google did, they recognized that they wanted to extend the reach to significantly more than 50% of their population who might use a gym, and created regeneration rooms where instead of having to change into your gym kit and shower afterwards, people could go and spend 10 minutes doing a breathing class, engaging with a coach, doing some relaxation exercises, and taking what we believe to be a movement snack, which is just reactivating the body. It's these sorts of themes that we want to focus in on today, just to encourage you to be able to take 5 to 10 minutes out of your day at any moment in time to reflect internally, to start to think about how you can develop resilience, and really to focus on your own performance. Talk about performance as a really key theme of the next 30, 45 minutes. And when we talk about performance, people tend to sort of almost shy away from the word because it feels like a word that only relates to athletes. Well, I'm going to hand over to Di in a second, who's going to talk to you about how performance is for everybody. But I would like everyone to start to get their head into the space of how can we optimize our own personal performance and what are the factors that are holding you back. Di, over to you.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. Welcome and thank you for joining us. We will get into some practical elements here shortly, but before that, I want to provide some context to the content that we're going to go through. And Chris started to touch upon elite performers there, and the concept of performance. It's often a misconceived notion that it's only for the elite. Enter human performance, and human performance really is something that is for everyone. It can take any form, any shape, depending on the individual. It is literally showing up as the best version of yourself in whichever aspect of your life you deem to be important. This changes over time. For many, it is in their career. As they evolve and grow into a family, it's spending time with their children. You want to perform well in all these areas. And not only that, it's driven very much fundamentally by the concept of longevity. So when we talk about lifespan and the average lifespan now being into the mid-70s up to 80, we also want to consider things like our health span. So how much of that time that we have on this earth is driven by quality of life? How much of that time do we keep ourselves refrained from medicines and requiring medical treatment? We also have the play span, and the play span for an athlete would be the time that they spend on the field, on the court, in their professional career. But for everyone on this call, the play span might be recreational sport. It may be, as Lydia talked about, being able to go for a run in the morning, pain-free if it's something that's important to you. So with the mindset, the performance mindset, we can really drive improvements in our human performance to increase our play span, extend our health span, to give us a more enjoyable lifespan. So with that in mind, when we go through the content here, we really need to lean in to things that have changed. And Chris, again, did touch upon this a little bit, how the human performance industry, how companies and organizations view wellness in the workplace has certainly evolved. But I really want you to think about the challenges of this last year, which Chris will again touch upon here in a moment, and how your approach to your health, your wellness, your fitness, your performance has changed over this last year.
Yeah, thanks, Di. The last year, we know, and Lydia described it well, has been such a challenge for us. Some people have been better equipped to soldier on, and it's been a bit of a breeze. Some of the comments coming up in how we described our last year were maybe a bit of a surprise. It has been at times peaceful and reflective, but for many, it has been a real challenge. And it's fair to say we've learned to use our time differently. And our go-to methods of how we find inner peace, if you like, has changed. We've experienced new challenges. I mentioned some of those before, having kids run on in the middle of Zoom calls, not the least of my worries. And so I think if we think about the main reasons why people would start to look for something different other than being locked down, as we then come to the challenge of getting back into work and getting back into some normal life, what are the main factors driving and influencing people to go and seek the need to change? I think we know from data that pain relief, over 30% experience a loss in productivity from pain relief. We know that dealing with stress causes 7 out of 10 people to take some time off work during the year, and trying to find time to be with family and be with community is a real driver. The sense of urgency increases the likelihood of us taking positive action. And those drivers tend to stimulate the greatest need to act and encourage us to set goals, set effective goals, and to form good habits. And probably most of us have tried setting goals from time to time, but those goals aren't always successful. We know about SMART goals and the acronym. I won't take you into that. I think everybody has their own definition, but actually it can feel quite complicated. And what we'd like to do today is stress that by anchoring your goals to good habits that are linked to your values is the best way to form effective goals. Small iterations and practice, practice, practice. Di, over to you again.
It's important then with this to talk about the response. How do we respond in this VUCA world? Over the course of the last 15, 16 months, as we saw from the previous discussion, there's been a lot of change. There's been a lot that we have been presented with individually, but also on a global scale. And it's important to remember that all stress is cumulative, and some stressors have effectively been eliminated from our lives, things like the daily commute, the impact on the underground or on the train. That stress has gone, but others have replaced them. And it's how we deal with those stressors, how we respond to the stressors, that's important. When we are presented with stress, the body reacts in a general way. Whether it's a physical stress, an emotional stress, the response is exactly the same. It's the general adaptation syndrome. So you will have a heightened state of nervous activity. There are things happening in your brain, neurotransmitters and receptors, that cause you to go into a state of effectively perceived fear. Now, you may see something on a newsreel that may not affect you directly. Regardless, it may be perceived as a fear. So your nervous system goes into this heightened state of activation. And with that, it becomes ever increasingly more difficult to really focus on the things that you need to. So we often find ourselves diving into habits at the end of our day, particularly where we just want to switch our brain off. So we go into a Netflix binge, or maybe we'll pour the extra glass of wine. And I just want to call out that these are okay. It's okay to do this, but do it with the recognition that it's not really giving you any energy back into your system. And this is where you start to change into the performance mindset. So when we go for the extra glass of wine, or we sit there and watch 3 episodes, 5 episodes of your favorite show back to back, absolutely you are getting into a more relaxed state. So your brain is responding with releases of dopamine. dopamine is our happy hormone. So it makes us feel good. But this is short-lived. This is no different to being addicted to something like social media, where you're scrolling and looking for your likes. Every time you see a like or you have a message, you get that hit of dopamine. It makes you feel good. But it's an unnatural way to receive that dopamine response. And what effectively can happen is those false inputs of dopamine into your system can actually cause you long-term to be in an even further reduced, relaxed state. We want serotonin. Serotonin is the hormone that drives a sense of calm. So it's often found in street format in things like antidepressants or even recreational drugs like MDMA. But we can produce this, it does produce naturally in our body. And a large amount of it is actually produced in the gut. So we could even talk about things like nutrition and how our gut health affects our mental state. But we want to drive up serotonin to give us the overriding feeling that everything is okay, effectively down-regulate our nervous system. Just like there was ways to increase our dopamine response naturally, we can also increase our serotonin, down-regulate our sense of calm to get better sleep, better recovery, because we know that sleep is the #1 performance enhancer, bar none, but only if it's done correctly. So the important thing is recognition within your daily patterns, your daily habits of what is actually feeding energy into your system, what is driving you forward, what is putting you in that growth framework to be a better version of yourself, to show up as the best version of yourself in whatever is important to you. So before we do dive into anything practical, we've covered a little bit of theory there. I just wanted to pause to see if there were any questions at this juncture. You can start to get yourself comfortable. If you do have some space and you feel comfortable to stand or lay down, you can do this, but you'll also be able to do the practical elements seated in your chair.
Just one thing I want to point out in the chat that I think is really interesting as you guys are going through this. Some of the things that we're hearing is that productivity and business from the point of view of, you know, being glued to a screen is really skyrocketing. It's very successful, but what is really dropping is our attention to mental and physical health. And so some of these exercises and all the things that we're talking about, empowering ourselves through understanding and trusting ourselves as leaders, standing up to say that these are okay, and then taking some of these toolkits away. You know, I think it's just really coming full circle with you guys, what you guys are saying. I just wanted to point that out in the chat. I mean, the next year can be about us a little bit more.
Yeah, the borders of what we're doing with our lives have been blurred. Work has become home, home has become work, and it's very difficult to switch off. I think a lot of people find themselves working maybe later into the evening. So yes, productivity has improved in many workplace situations, but at what expense? And what we've seen in our line of work is the expense is on the individual. Now, the individual's mental and physical health has been affected. How do we recognize this on an individual level? Well, it begins with giving yourself permission. It shouldn't have to be giving yourself permission, because what you're giving yourself permission for is to be healthier, to have an improved fitness capacity, an improved mental health capacity. But it starts there, and recognizing that these small habit changes begin with the permission and will be cumulative, just give you a better outcome on all aspects of your life, not only in the workplace.
We should have thought it through, Sarah, and had the Mentimeter one more time to ask people if they have 5 minutes during their day of busy Zoom calls, what would their first priority be to do? Because my sense is we grasp that time and we use it in ways which don't always benefit us. You know, we may shove a bit of food in because there's not time to get a proper lunch, or we may choose to make a call or to run through social media. And I think what we love to try and articulate, despite, you know, there's a bit of scientific discussion going on just to try to understand the principles here. But quite simply, what Di's about to take us through, I think, is if we can anchor to some of these great behaviors, which feel like they're a million miles away, but in truth, they can be so simple and so effective if people can just get into those good habits.
Yes, and part of this high performance mindset, or this performance driven mindset, is all built around habit. We've all gone through periods of really high motivation, periods of really low motivation, and that may have been undulating over the last year, more so than ever before. Where we lose motivation, that's where habits would take control, and habits are always going to be more powerful than fleeting motivation. Whether that fleeting motivation is to get in shape for an upcoming beach holiday or a wedding, or whatever it may be, it's the process and the habits that you form that are going to actually drive you towards the outcome goals. How do you formulate those habits? It can be quite difficult, especially when you're stuck in, as we just referred to, this blurred situation. But with habit formation, what is important is that you attach your habits to your core values. Now, everyone is going to have different core values, and this would be another conversation, another topic all unto itself. But habit transformation starts with little chunks. It's an iterative process, and it's going to change as your core values change. Like we referred to at the beginning of the talk, over the long period of time, maybe it shifts from career to family to travel, but things also shift in the short term as well, from one quarter to the next. Core values may change, but it's important to find a way and to engage yourself in practices where first you identify those core values and then think about what you're doing in your daily practice, and are they driving you towards your core values or not? And it helps you decide then within your day what is important to do and what is not. So one of the great things about habit formation is where we put it in our day. I like to think of it as bookends of your day. So these are typically the times where we have the most control over our schedule, over what we're doing. First thing in the morning, last thing at night. One of the best ways to kickstart your habits, whether it's work habits, whether it's health habits, is to really work in the morning on setting your intentions. You only need 3 to 5 minutes. It can be done at breakfast. It can be done mentally when you're in the shower, but setting yourself some intentions for the day. And it only needs to be 2 or 3 intentions, things that you really want to get done today, things that are really attached to your core values, things that are really going to push your performance forward. At the end of the day then, all you can do is spend 5 to 10 minutes reviewing your intentions. Did you achieve all the intentions you set out for the day? Maybe not. If not, why not? And this is where it becomes an iterative process. Were there barriers that got in the way of you achieving your 3 goals for the day? What could you change for the next day that would drive you towards your goals a little bit more? Did you complete 1 of the 3, 2 of the 3? How do you feel about that? What could you change tomorrow that would level you up in your performance to allow you to achieve another 1 of those goals, or maybe exceed your own expectations and deliver on something beyond the intentions that you set in the morning? And this is something, we talk about performers, this is something that the Navy SEALs have adopted. They go on to a mission knowing, it's life or death. When that mission is complete, they will sit together, they will review the mission. What happened? Why did things happen? If they were to do this mission again, what would they do differently that would give it a more positive outcome, whether it's reduced in a short period of time or just a higher performance outcome on that mission. So with those habits comes self-care. as well. So they can be driven around your work, they can be driven around homeschooling, like assisting your children and your family in dealing with the VUCA environment as well. But when it comes to self-care, there are these snacks that Chris alluded to, and this is where we get into a little bit more of a practical element. Now, these snacks are small chunks of time. And what we're going to go through here is not going to take really any much more than 7-8 minutes to perform. You don't have to leave the environment of your workspace, but it still drives high benefits to your performance, to your sense of wellness, and your overall health and fitness. You can do them between meetings. So if you've got a little bit of time from one to the next, you can just jump in, and all, just like stress is cumulative, all these little habits are also cumulative. So that's what we're going to do now, is we're going to start off with a little breathwork practice. So we talked about dopamine, we talked about serotonin, the other one is adrenaline. Now, we often lean in on caffeine. Many of us will drink excessive amounts of caffeine to drive up our focus. Adrenaline drives your focus. Just like we've evolved from hunters, and we may have been out in the jungle, and this is a very hypothetical situation, and all of a sudden there's a saber-toothed tiger. That is going to get your heart racing. That is going to increase your adrenaline, because now you're in this fight, flight, or freeze state. Am I going to fight for my life? Am I going to just freeze? Or am I going to run away? These are your choices. But it's all driven by adrenaline, because your focus becomes 100% on that situation. We can replicate this situation, but in a more calm way, to help us focus on those things that are important to us. So it could be preparing for a meeting. It could be switching off at the end of the day so that you can have a nice family dinner. But it's about getting into this flow state. Flow state being in the zone. Athletes have it all the time. Most major sporting championships have been won by competitors in that flow state. And we've all experienced that flow state in anything from our own athletic endeavors right through to a time where we're really 100% thrown into a spreadsheet. And all of a sudden hours have passed and you've thought of nothing else. We can manufacture that flow state with some breath work. So we're going to start to focus here on how we can draw in that flow state artificially, in a way, with just this relaxed breathing. So I want you to find a comfortable position. Now, if you feel comfortable seated, that is okay. If you feel comfortable as well, lay down on the ground. You don't have to be on camera or anything, but we want to access a nice straight spine. So if you're seated, back in your chair, think of the button on the top of your baseball cap being pulled right up to the sky. If you're laying down on the ground, bend your knees with your feet flat on the floor, or any comfortable position for you. I want you to place one hand on your tummy, one hand on your chest. We are only going to breathe, first of all, as best as you can through your nose. So I just want you to think of the air coming in through your nose, the air going out through your nose. Nothing else, just focusing on the intake and then the exhale. If you feel comfortable and safe, you can close your eyes. You can cover your eyes to shut out some of the light. This also helps to downregulate the system and increase serotonin. As you go through the breaths, with each breath, try and get ever slower. So slow down the inhale, slow down the exhale. As you feel the breath extend, I want you to think of the breath coming in 3 ways. So as you draw the air in, first we expand through the belly. So that hand that is on your tummy, you should feel expand first. If that doesn't happen naturally, force the belly button out. So we're really using the diaphragm. Then it comes up, the ribs expand. And the third part is where you just feel the air come all the way into your upper back. We don't want to shrug the shoulders. And then we slowly exhale. So focus on these three parts of the inhale. And if you need something to focus on, pick a color for today. Whatever that color is, envision that color coming in through your nose as you inhale. It fills your tummy like a ball expanding, rising up ever more, expanding into your ribs and into your upper back. Slow on the exhale. So this is just warming up the muscles involved in breathing. We take our breathing for granted. In order to be calm, in order to drive both focus and calm, we need to slow the breath down. We have evolved in a negative way where 20 breaths a minute has become the norm. Now, what happens with 20 breaths per minute? The breathing becomes shallow. It often goes to the mouth, not through the nasal passages, which actually decreases the amount of oxygen that the body can uptake and process. Now, we know the brain needs oxygen. If we slow the breathing down, if we keep this focused through the nasal passages, we are going to increase our oxygen uptake. We are going to drive that sense of calm, drive that sense of focus. And just like any other muscle, the diaphragm can be trained. Right now, as you slow down the exhale, try to slow it down to around 8 seconds. You are working on strengthening the diaphragm. That is a muscle. And when you feel ready, we are going to switch the cadence of our breath a little. So we're going to switch to a box breath. A box breath is really, really positive for driving the focus and getting into that flow state. So now you can focus on the counting of the breath when you feel comfortable with the movement of the breath. We are going to inhale for 5 seconds, a full deep inhale. Then you're going to pause at the top of that inhale for 5 seconds. Then you are going to exhale for 5 seconds. And then pause at the bottom of the exhale for 5 seconds. So we are working our way around the box, 5 seconds on each side. Give yourself a slow count on the 5 seconds. When you hit these pause moments in the breath, there shouldn't be any tension. We are literally just taking a pause. We're not holding against any resistance. We want to keep it calm and relaxed. So whether you're laying down, whether you're in a seated position, keep those shoulders low. Focus on your color. Fill in your body with your color from head to toe as you bring it in. And if you feel good, extend the 5-second breath to 6 seconds. So now we can work 6 seconds around the box. Again, slowing the breath down. Never feeling that air hunger because we are fully inhaling through the 5 or 6 seconds. And we'll go with this box breath for just around 1 more minute. Never losing sight, never losing focus on the tummy expanding first. The rib cage really expanding out. You want to feel like you are a tire, and that tire expands as it fills with air. And really work to slow down the exhale. At the end of your next exhale, just to sort of end up on the breath work portion, we're going to take 3 rinsing breaths. So you can take a nice deep breath in through the nose. And as you exhale, as if you were fogging up a mirror with your breath, but keeping your mouth closed. Inhale deep. Exhale. One more time, your third and final rinsing breath. Inhale and exhale. This is called a wave breath, the sound of a wave exhaling through your body. So that would hopefully have driven a little bit more sense of calm already. Now the muscles are more relaxed, the nervous system is more relaxed. We can move into some movement. We're going to go through a sequence. We're only going to focus here today on the upper body. So we're going to focus on the joints of the neck, the shoulder, and the scapula, the shoulder blades, as well as the thoracic spine. We're going to go through controlled articular rotations, known as CARs. So if you want to access any of this after the session and you forget, just go on YouTube and enter neck CARs, shoulder CARs, hip CARs. Any key joint is available. What we're going to do is take each joint through its full range of motion, but I want you to view each joint in its own bubble. The bubble is yours. It's your 3-dimensional bubble, so you know your limitations. We're not going to force a stretch through any positions. So if you feel like you have tension in a particular area, we're just going to keep that bubble small. If you feel good, you feel relaxed, expand your bubble. Try and move through greater ranges of motion. This practice is really good as part of a morning routine, because if everything else in your day takes over from self-care, what you've done, as well as relaxing your system, is taking the key joints through their full existing range of motion. So what you're going to achieve by doing that is you're not going to decrease any further range of motion. So even without stretching, even without exercising formally, you're not going to go backwards. And if you're in a position where range of motion at a particular joint is restricted, CARs are already going to help increase that range of motion. So we'll start with the neck. So again, sitting up tall, and if you want to, you can stand for this as well, but just so you can see, I will remain seated. I want you to tuck your chin down to your chest. From here, you're going to tilt your right ear towards your right shoulder, and then make a big circle with the tip of your nose right over the top, taking your left ear towards your left shoulder, bringing your chin back towards your chest. Then we're going to work the same thing in reverse. Left ear to left shoulder, big circle over the top through the tip of your nose, right ear to right shoulder, chin down to your chest. Keep going in those alternating left-right movements. Go super, super slow. I want you to move as if you're moving through some thick jelly. With each rep, try and increase the range as it feels comfortable if you want to make that bubble bigger. And we also want to focus and isolate on the joints within the neck. So we can actually create tension in other parts of the body. So you can actually create some nice tight fists, push down imaginarily towards the floor to create tension through the rest of your system, driving up our nervous activation, which is going to help us take control of that range of motion in your neck. When you've completed about 3 reps there on each side, we're going to move down and we're actually going to focus on the scapula. So the joints of the shoulder blade. Shoulder blades should glide nicely around your rib cage. So if I sit sideways so that you can see a little better here, all I want you to do is think of your shoulder actually moving around the 4 points of the compass, keeping your neck in a nice position with the baseball cap up to the sky, shoulders rise up to your ears. They go to the north. Draw the shoulder blades back to the east, pull them down to the south, and then draw them forwards to the west. Work through that full circle, all 4 points of the compass once again. Each repetition that you perform, imagining those points of the compass being slightly further away. So you're going to reach towards the points. Try and keep that spine straight. Again, you can be standing or seated as you do this. Move through those slow jelly-like states. Keep your head drawn up to the sky like a puppet on a string. When you've done 3 in one direction, change and reverse the movement, 3 in the opposite direction. Shoulder blades are gliding. What we're doing is undoing the work created on the body by this seated position where we all often find ourselves hunched, especially when we're in that work from home environment. If your desk is not set up in the same way, I'm right here working from my dining table, as I'm sure many of you are as well. It's not ergonomically optimal. So we need to strengthen the system through the shoulder blades and the surrounding musculature to get into that right position, which in turn allows us to breathe more deeply, bring in more oxygen, etc. When we've done 3 each direction, we're actually going to move into the shoulder joint itself. So I'll stand up for this one so that you can see a little better. I invite you to stand as well if you feel comfortable to do so. One arm down by your side. We're going to create some tension in the fist. I want you to lift that arm up, thumb leads the way, as high as you can. We're not going to force anything to the point where we lean back. We're not going to put any undue stress on our spine. I want you to focus on your ribs staying down as if they're connected to your hips. When you reach your top point, wherever it is, you're going to turn the thumb outside, make as big a circle as you can, bring your fist to your pocket. Go back the other way. Thumb leads the way. When you cannot raise back any further, start to turn as you make that big circle back down in front of your body. Repeat that process 3 times. Again, slow and controlled. Moving through some thick tar, some sludge. You take that front view, you'll hopefully be able to see we're not leaning in any way. We are really trying to isolate that shoulder joint. Just 3 repetitions. When you've completed on one side, perform the same thing on the other side. It is common, very, very common and okay to be feeling a difference from one side to the next. We don't have to address that now. All I want you to do is just recognize that there may be a difference in movement accessibility from one side to the next. Just be aware of it. And the last one that we're going to do is through the thoracic spine. So the thoracic spine, the mid to upper back, this is the region that we really need our body to rotate through. This is the part of the spine that requires the most mobility for shoulder health, for neck health, for our ability to expand and intake the breath. So we're going to put your hands across your chest, just like we did with the neck. We're going to curl forward. Again, you can do this in a seated position as well. We're going to take the right shoulder towards the right hip. Now we're going to draw that big circle, lifting the chest to the sky before the left shoulder comes over towards the left hip. And then we curl back in front. When we're here, now I want you to lift right up to the sky before you come back down in front, and then repeat, go in the opposite direction. So we roll the left shoulder to the left hip, big circle over the top. Again, work in your bubble. If you feel any pain anywhere in the movement, just decrease the size of your bubble to the point where that pain goes. If there's a specific spot within the movement that you feel like you're jamming into it, just go around it. Just avoid that part of the movement. So we'll just do 2 repetitions there in each direction.
I commonly asked questions here about how this can be difficult. How do people know they're doing it right?
There's no right or wrong. So there is no right or wrong. The beauty of the human body is it's designed to move freely. And this is a misconception about training and exercise. Traditionally, gyms, right, what we are familiar with in terms of resistance training, many are in a fixed pattern. So it could be a fixed seated piece of equipment. It could be laying on a bench with some dumbbells. It's not allowing the body to freely move through ranges of motion. The body is designed specifically to rotate. So it's about movement exploration. It's with each key joint exploring your range of motion. And there is no right or wrong. There's no optimal here. It's just over time, that is going to expand.
And final question, how do people measure their progression?
Progression is going to be with feeling. So you're just going to really bring it internally. And I use the example there of the shoulder potentially feeling different and restricted on one side compared to the other. Just over time, you're just going to start to feel less of a gap there, for example. You're going to start to feel that you're accessing new ranges. You're actually going to feel stronger in certain joints than you did before. And this is going to carry over if you are a runner, if you are a cyclist, if you go out for a walk, you're actually going to prolong your ability, your endurance, by strengthening these ranges of motion. So it's going to be awareness of your activities that you perform in life, even your awareness of how you feel when you're in a seated position at the desk, just monitoring that improvement on an individual level. I just want to finish with 1 more minute of breath work. So with the movement, we increase our nervous system again, because we're having higher neural activation to control the movement. So we're just going to calm it back down. So once again, find yourself that comfortable position, seated or laying down, nice straight spine. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes. We're going to go back to the nasal breathing. And this time we want the exhale to be twice as long as the inhale. So whether you are going for a 4-second inhale and an 8-second exhale, or a 5 and a 10, or a 3 and a 6, work within your capability right now. But you inhale, fully inhale, try and make it last at least 4 to 5 seconds. If you can go 6 seconds, perfect. Pause at the top, 2 to 3 second pause, and then slow down that exhale. I'm going to give you a 5-8 count. So if you're with me, and you can go at your own pace, but if you're with me, pull the air in, 4, 3, 2, 1, hold at the top, and exhale. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. 4, 5. Pause. Exhale. 3, 2, 1. Continue with this pattern as we wrap up the session, but extending the exhale for double the time of the inhale is one of the most effective ways to quickly draw down and downregulate nervous activity. So if you find yourself in a position, in a situation of anxiety, this is a great way to calm the nervous system. If you want to get settled for bed, either in bed or before you go up to bed, again, this is a great way to calm that nervous system, allow your body to have a deeper, more effective sleep. So again, a great one to practice maybe after a stressful meeting, if you need to switch gears before going into the next meeting or the next task, and all done in a nice, easy, short space of time.
Thanks, Di. It's fantastic work. Well done, everyone, if you got a chance to participate, and thank you for your participation. Please feel free to continue just having a few deep breaths as we just wrap up for a couple of minutes. Just wanted to circle back on 3 simple tips to try to ensure you can find some time in your day to use some of these breathing and exercise snacks. They are really simple, worth writing down, but please do drop us a note if any of the stuff we've done today feels relevant to you or your organizations, and we can help you in any way by connecting and providing some of that information back to you. But the simple tips really are just recognition. First and foremost, give yourself permission to take some time, even schedule that time in your diary, just 5 or 10 minutes here or there, between meetings, between those busy segments of the day, to just take some time for yourself. You shouldn't feel guilty. And the more you do it, the more it becomes a natural stop just to recharge. Secondly, create some space, some mental space for yourself in terms of contracting, almost getting in agreement that you will do this. You will find time to fit it into your busy day. It's so easy to find excuses to do something different. But as Di has shown us, it can take as little as 2 minutes to do some breathing. It can take as little as 5 minutes to do some mobility, and you will feel the immediate relaxation and release of the serotonin to help you. So bookending your day, the beginning of your day, the end of the day, tends to be those times when people automatically have a little bit of time and space, and maybe take 1 minute less to dry your hair or shower, and find a bit of time to go through some movement work. And finally, iterate and don't frustrate. You know, it's great being led by an incredible coach and whose calming words can help take you through this, but everybody has to find their own preferable way to do things. If something doesn't work, change it. If we set 2 or 3 habits for the day and we can't do them, then maybe one's enough. It doesn't need to be successful every time, but recognize the barriers for you, the challenges you face, what bits of it stopped you, what interrupted you, what mental thoughts clogged your path, and try to find a workaround. Recognize the successes, and then we urge you to practice, practice, and practice some more. Thanks very much.
Amazing stuff, guys. Thank you. It really was. I mean, I'm ready now to start the day. So thank you so much. I do want to pause for a minute and see if anyone has anything they want to add to the group before we kind of wrap up and give you a little bit of a sound bite for the session we're running next week. No? Okay. Well, thank you guys very much for coming. Hopefully today you really saw that we wanted to give you some tangible components to take into your lives and really empower you in this crazy time that we're in. Change is not going anywhere. I think that we knew that before this crazy year, but now it's just here to stay, and that's okay. So taking time for yourself, really having confidence and building that, trusting those around you. And the sessions today were meant to be about you, but also how can you take those to wider community elements. So with Lydia and Menta's session, really making sure to build that up and down the ladder at work, take that into all your relationships that you have, but always come back to yourself, because if you're not successful, that's not going to be successful either. That sort of takes us into next week, where we're carrying on the same exact theme, and where we will starting to be looking at building confidence and connections. With the session next week, we'll have amazing coaches, Amelia and Gabi, who are going to start to look at meeting your inner critic and then really tackle what is that? What does that mean for you? And you need to look at how you embody that and not see it as a negative, and really work on what that means. But at the same time, cover things like imposter syndrome. Again, that's not a bad thing, but really acknowledging what's out there for us and how we move forward with confidence. And then part 2 will be with Rachel and Rosie. And this will be about belonging and finding a new understanding of people and place. What is that wider community as we work into a hybrid way of life? I think in the chat, people will have noticed that Peter mentioned his company is completely changing. Work from anywhere. I'd love to hear more about that. And guys, it's going to be different for all of us, but what does that experience, that human connection, really mean for us now in this new world? So again, we're very excited about the next session. It's all about you, and hopefully you'll join us next week. Just one more minute to let the speakers say anything they might want to wrap up with, or if anybody's come up with anything they would like to chime in with, feel free to take yourself off mute and join in.
I just say thank you everyone for joining today, and wishing you all the best in this VUCA world.
Likewise, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you for your participation as well, for trying something that would have been very new to many of you. And if there are any further questions from it, I did post my email in the chat, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Dar. That's great. Well, guys, then I think that's us, and have a fantastic Wednesday.